Hey guys, tonight we ease into the quiet, influential world behind the sliding screens and polished tatami mats of Edo period Japan. Imagine stepping through a heavy wooden gate, leaving the bustling streets of Edo behind, and entering the hushed calm of a samurai estate. The air smells of polished wood, maybe a faint hint of incense, and the distant sounds of the city fade away. This is where the real power often resided, not in the grand pronouncements of men, but in the meticulous, tireless work of the women who ran these complex households. Let's be honest, navigating the politics of a samurai home? You probably wouldn't survive a week without stepping on someone's toes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. So, you find yourself standing just inside that gate, the gravel crunching softly under your feet. You've stepped into a world that, on the surface, seems entirely dominated by men. The samurai, the warrior class, are the pillars of society, the administrators, the figures of authority. Their lives are dictated by codes of honor, duty, and service to their lord or the shogun. Their public image is one of martial prowess, stoic resolve, and political maneuvering. But step further into the complex of buildings that make up their home, and you enter a different realm entirely, a realm where the samurai wife, the Okuzan as she was often respectfully called, was the undisputed, albeit often unseen, commander-in-chief. The Edo period, stretching from 1603 to 1868, was a time of relative peace after centuries of civil war. The samurai, no longer primarily soldiers fighting on battlefields, transitioned into a bureaucratic and administrative class. They served the shogun or their local daimyo, feudal lord, managing domains, collecting taxes, and maintaining order. This shift meant they spent a significant portion of their time away from home, attending to official duties, political meetings, or even residing in Edo for mandatory periods under the Sankin-Kotai system, where lords had to spend alternating years in the capital. This absence, this focus on public life, created a vacuum at home that the wife was expected, indeed required, to fill entirely. Your perception of a samurai home might be shaped by movies, flashing swords, dramatic duels. But the reality for most was a sprawling, intricate domestic ecosystem. The size and complexity varied greatly depending on the samurai's rank and wealth. A high-ranking samurai might have a vast estate with multiple buildings, gardens, stables, and a large staff. A lower-ranking samurai might have a more modest house, but still large by commoner standards, and a smaller complement of servants. Regardless of size, it was a self-contained world. And at the heart of this world, making it function, was the wife. Her position wasn't just about managing laundry and meals, though those were certainly part of it. She was the central hub of the household's operations, the one who oversaw everything from the smallest detail to the most significant decision within the domestic sphere. Think of it like running a small, highly complex business, except the business is your family's entire existence, reputation, and future. You're not just the CEO, you're HR, finance, operations, security, and often the chief diplomat, all rolled into one person. And you have to do it all with impeccable grace and efficiency, because any slip-up reflects directly on your husband's competence and standing. No pressure, right? The term Okuzan itself is telling. It literally means person of the interior, or one who is inside. This reflects her domain, the inner workings of the home, the private space. While the husband interacted with the external world of politics and duty, the wife governed the internal world of family, servants, and resources. Her authority wasn't formal or legal in the same way her husband's was in the public sphere, but within the walls of their estate, her word was law for the household staff and children. She was the mistress, the manager, the matriarch. It was a role that demanded immense capability, intelligence, and resilience. Historians still argue whether the term Okuzan truly signifies inherent domestic power, or merely describes her physical location within the home, reinforcing her separation from the important external world. But regardless of the academic debate, The practical reality on the ground was that someone had to make the household run, and that someone was almost always the wife. Her duties were exhaustive, encompassing areas that today might be handled by dozens of different specialists. She managed the household's finances, supervised the education of the children, oversaw the health and well-being of everyone under her roof, directed the servants, handled social obligations, and ensured the household was prepared for any emergency, from illness to fire to famine. This was not a life of leisure, even for the wives of wealthy samurai. While they had servants to perform the physical labor, the planning, the oversight, the decision-making, the sheer mental load rested squarely on the wife's shoulders. Imagine trying to keep track of the dietary needs of 20 people, the inventory of textiles for clothing everyone from your husband to the stable boy, the fluctuating price of rice, the social calendar requiring gifts and visits, the educational progress of your son learning calligraphy and sword forms, and the health of your elderly mother-in-law, all without spreadsheets or email. It makes your modern to-do list look like a walk in the park. It's like juggling chainsaws while blindfolded, except the chainsaws are the family fortune and your husband's career. This central, pivotal role was largely invisible to the outside world. While samurai men were celebrated for their public achievements, the success of their household management was simply expected of their wives. It was the quiet engine that allowed the public machine to function. Her competence ensured the family's stability, reputation, and prosperity. Her failures could lead to financial ruin, social disgrace, or even the breakdown of the family unit. So, as you settle deeper into the cushions, let's peel back the layers of history and step further into the private world of the Edo samurai home, where the wife's influence, though rarely spoken of in public, was profoundly felt in every corner. It's a story of quiet power, immense responsibility, and the unsung women who held the fabric of samurai life together. You've navigated the initial threshold, felt the weight of the Okuzan's unseen presence. Now let's step deeper into the labyrinth itself, the household hierarchy. Forget the simple master-servant dynamic you might imagine. A samurai estate was less like a family home with staff and more like a miniature, self-contained village with its own strict social order. And guess who was at the very top of the internal pyramid? Yep, still the wife. While her husband was the lord of the estate in name, and in the eyes of the external world, within the walls, she held the reins over every person who wasn't a direct family member of equal or senior status, like a formidable mother-in-law, but we'll get to her later. Think of it like running a small corporation, but instead of departments, you have layers of people with very specific roles, all reporting up the chain. At the bottom were the general laborers, gardeners, stable hands, gatekeepers, kitchen helpers, maybe even some lower-status samurai retainers who weren't high enough to have their own independent homes. Above them were the various ranks of maids for the women's quarters, male servants for general duties and attending the husband, and specialized staff like cooks, laundresses, and tutors. And presiding over them all, often through a layer of senior, trusted retainers like a head steward or a senior lady-in-waiting, was the wife herself. Your first few days trying to figure out who reported to whom would probably feel like navigating a particularly tricky level in a video game, except the stakes are social humiliation and potentially messing up dinner for 24 people. You couldn't just tell the gardener to fetch tea. You had to go through the proper channels, perhaps asking a junior maid, who would ask a senior maid, who might then relay the request to a male servant if it was for the master. This wasn't just bureaucracy. It was about maintaining order, respect, and clear lines of authority. The wife couldn't be everywhere at once, so she relied heavily on these senior staff members to manage the day-to-day operations and report back to her. They were her eyes and ears, her lieutenants in the domestic army. A mainstream historical fact about this structure is the sheer number and variety of roles. Depending on the samurai's rank, a household could employ dozens, sometimes even over 100 people. You had Kashimoto, the personal maids who attended directly to the wife, Chujin, general male servants, Wakafuro, young male servants often used for errands, Kuriakata, kitchen staff, Manban, gatekeepers, and many more. Each had specific duties, uniforms or identifying sashes, and knew their place in the pecking order. This wasn't a casual arrangement. It was a highly structured system that required constant oversight. Imagine managing payroll, schedules, performance reviews, probably less formal than ours, more like sharp glances and pointed questions, and inter-staff disputes for that many people, all while also balancing the budget and raising the kids. Makes your office job suddenly look appealingly simple, doesn't it? The wife's authority wasn't just administrative, it was deeply personal. She was responsible for the well-being, discipline, and even the personal lives of her staff. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that samurai wives sometimes acted as matchmakers for their senior servants, arranging marriages within the household or with trusted families from other estates. This wasn't just kindness, it was a way to build loyalty, ensure stability, and keep valuable skills within the household. It also gave her another layer of influence and control over the lives of those who served her. Try telling your boss today that you need her approval to get married. You'd probably get a very confused HR memo. But in the samurai home, it was just another thread in the complex tapestry the wife wove. Scholars still argue whether the wife's power over the household was truly independent, or merely delegated authority from her husband. Did she make decisions autonomously based on her own judgment and experience, or was she expected to constantly consult him or follow general directives? The reality likely varied greatly depending on the individual couple and the husband's level of engagement with domestic affairs. Most were too busy with public duties to micromanage the pantry, thankfully. But regardless of the theoretical source of her power, the practical exercise of it fell squarely on her shoulders. She was the one who had to deal with a servant caught stealing rice, or mediate a squabble between the head cook and the vegetable washer, or decide if a maid was too ill to work. These weren't decisions that could wait for the master to return from Edo. Managing this complex human ecosystem required a specific set of skills. You needed to be an excellent judge of character to hire reliable staff. You needed to be firm but fair to maintain discipline. You needed to be observant to spot problems before they escalated. And you needed to have an almost encyclopedic knowledge of everyone's strengths, weaknesses, and relationships within the household. It was constant people management on a scale most of us can barely imagine. And remember, you're doing all this while maintaining the appearance of quiet domesticity. No shouting, no public displays of frustration. Just calm, measured directives delivered through layers of intermediaries. It's like being the conductor of an orchestra where half the musicians are teenagers and the other half are secretly plotting to steal your sheet music. The wife's relationship with her staff was often nuanced. While she held absolute authority, mutual respect was crucial for a smoothly running household. A harsh or unfair mistress would face resentment, inefficiency, and potentially even sabotage, though outright rebellion was rare due to the strict social codes. A good wife would inspire loyalty and dedication. Some senior staff served the same family for generations, becoming almost like extended family members themselves, privy to intimate details of family life. They were the keepers of household secrets, the carriers of traditions, and the living memory of past events. Their loyalty was invaluable. Imagine you're the head maid, reporting directly to the Okuzan. Your day starts before dawn, overseeing the junior maids, ensuring the household is clean, getting the fire started in the kitchen. You bring the wife her morning tea, discuss the day's schedule, report any issues from the previous day. A servant is ill, the rice delivery is late, the master's favorite robe needs mending. You are her right hand, her confidant in domestic matters. Your competence directly reflects on her management. The pressure is intense, but your position also holds significant power within the servant hierarchy. You're the one the junior staff fears and respects. It's a powerful position, but entirely dependent on staying in the wife's good graces. One wrong step, one failure in judgment, and you could be demoted or even dismissed, losing your home and livelihood. This system wasn't just about convenience. It was essential for a samurai family's survival and status. A well-managed household reflected positively on the husband's ability to govern and maintain order, skills directly transferable to his public duties. A chaotic household, with lazy servants, financial mismanagement, or internal strife, would be a source of shame and could damage his reputation. So, the wife's command over this complex human ecosystem was not merely a domestic chore. It was a fundamental pillar supporting her husband's public life and the family's standing in the rigid social structure of the Edo period. She was the general of the home front, ensuring that while her husband fought the battles of bureaucracy and politics outside, the foundations of their life remained strong and orderly within. It was a constant juggling act, requiring endless patience, sharp intellect, and an iron will hidden beneath a veneer of graceful composure. And she did it, day after day, year after year, ensuring the smooth operation of a system that was far more intricate and demanding than it might appear on the surface. So, you've got your miniature kingdom of servants and retainers mostly sorted. Everyone knows their place, and the domestic machinery is humming along, mostly. But none of that happens for free, does it? Running a household, especially one potentially housing dozens of people, requires a constant flow of resources. And in the samurai world, those resources came primarily in the form of a stipend from the lord or the shogun, usually paid in rice or sometimes in gold or silver coin. This wasn't a salary you could just blow on the latest Edo fashion trends or a fancy new katana for the master, though maybe a small allowance for that was factored in. This was the lifeblood of the entire operation, and managing it fell squarely into the hands of the woman who ran the house, the wife, the okuzan. Think about your own household budget today. Rent/mortgage, utilities, groceries, transportation, clothes, maybe a little entertainment, saving for the future. It's a lot to track, right? Now multiply that by, let's say, 50 people living under your roof, with needs ranging from the finest silk for the master's formal wear to straw sandals for the lowliest stable hand, and add in the fluctuating price of your primary commodity, rice, and the fact that you might only get paid a couple of times a year. Suddenly, your budgeting app feels like a toy. The samurai wife was the family's chief financial officer, the head accountant, and the procurement manager, all rolled into one. Her office wasn't a corner suite. It was likely a quiet room off the main living quarters, filled with abacuses, *soroban*, account ledgers, *dacho*, and chests for storing currency or important documents. A mainstream historical fact about the samurai stipend system is that the value of the stipend was often measured in koku, a unit of volume representing the amount of rice needed to feed one person for 1 year, roughly 180 liters or 150 kilograms. A low-ranking samurai might receive a stipend of just a few koku, while a high-ranking lord could command hundreds of thousands. This rice wasn't just food, it was currency. It could be eaten, stored, or sold on the market for cash to buy other necessities that weren't produced on the estate. The wife was responsible for receiving this bulk payment, overseeing its storage, keeping it safe from pests and damp, deciding how much to keep for consumption, and how much to sell, and then managing the resulting cash. Imagine getting paid your entire annual salary in bags of rice and having to figure out how to pay for everything else with that. It required serious financial acumen. Budgeting was an intricate dance. The wife had to anticipate expenses for the entire year, food for everyone, which varied depending on the season and the number of guests or retainers present, clothing and textiles, heating fuel, wood or charcoal, repairs to the buildings, tools, medicines, supplies for household rituals, gifts for social obligations, travel expenses if the master had to journey, and maybe even saving up for larger purchases or emergencies. She had to allocate funds, or rice, to each area, ensuring that the family didn't run out of essential supplies before the next stipend arrived. This wasn't just about balancing the books. It was about ensuring the family's survival and maintaining their standard of living appropriate to their rank. A samurai family living beyond their means, constantly in debt, would quickly lose face and could face severe consequences from their lord. It's like trying to plan your grocery budget for a year based on a bulk delivery of potatoes, except if you run out of potatoes, your entire social standing collapses. Tracking expenses was meticulous work. Every expenditure, no matter how small, needed to be recorded. Ledgers detailed how much rice was used, how much was sold and for what price, how much cash was spent on textiles, how much on medicine, how much was paid to servants, some received wages in addition to room and board, and so on. This wasn't just for accountability. It allowed the wife to analyze spending patterns, identify areas where costs could be cut, and plan more effectively for the future. She was essentially running a sophisticated, manual accounting system. You probably complain about filling out an expense report once a month. Imagine doing it for every single purchase made by anyone in a household of 50 people, using brush and ink on fragile paper. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that samurai wives sometimes engaged in small-scale entrepreneurial activities to supplement the family income or manage resources more efficiently. This could involve overseeing the production of goods on the estate, like growing specific vegetables for sale, breeding silkworms for textile production, or even managing a small workshop if the family had artisans among their retainers. They might also invest in local ventures or lend money, though this was more common among wives of high-ranking samurai or wealthy merchants. These activities weren't just hobbies. They were strategic ways to make the most of the family's assets and provide a buffer against financial hardship. It's like your grandma selling knitted scarves at the local market, but if her sales slump, your family might not eat next winter. Historians still argue whether the wife's control over finances was absolute, or if the husband retained ultimate decision-making authority, especially regarding major expenditures or investments. While the wife handled the day-to-day management and budgeting, large sums might require the husband's approval. However, given the husband's frequent absences and focus on public life, it's likely that in many households, the wife had significant de facto autonomy in financial matters, relying on her own judgment and experience to keep the household solvent. She was the expert in this domain, and a wise husband would trust her expertise. Saving was also a key responsibility. Samurai life, while often stable in the Edo period, was not without risk. Fires were common in wooden cities, illnesses could strike, and political fortunes could change rapidly, affecting stipends. A prudent wife would set aside reserves of rice, cash, and other valuables to weather unexpected storms. These savings weren't just for personal comfort. They were a crucial safety net for the entire family and its dependents. Building and maintaining these reserves required discipline and foresight, often meaning making difficult choices about current spending to ensure future security. It's like saving for retirement, except your retirement fund might be stored in jars under the floorboards, and if the house burns down, you're starting from zero. The wife also had to manage the procurement of goods that weren't produced on the estate. This involved sending trusted servants to the markets in the nearest town or city to purchase items like salt, sugar, spices, pottery, metal goods, specialty fabrics, and tools. She had to know where to buy the best quality goods at the best prices, negotiate, or have her representative negotiate, effectively, and ensure the goods were transported safely back to the estate. This required market knowledge, a network of reliable suppliers, and the ability to spot a rip-off. Imagine doing all your shopping for 50 people without Amazon, price comparison websites, or even reliable scales, relying instead on the honesty of a merchant in a crowded, bustling market. Managing debt was another delicate balancing act. While ideally, a samurai family would live within its means, loans might be necessary in times of crisis or for major expenses like building repairs or supporting the husband's official duties. The wife was responsible for negotiating these loans, often with wealthy merchants, a class technically below samurai but often holding significant financial power, managing repayment schedules, and ensuring the family didn't fall into crushing debt that could lead to ruin. This required shrewdness, negotiation skills, and the ability to maintain good relationships with creditors. It's like dealing with your bank, but instead of a simple app, you're having tea with a merchant who holds your family's financial future in his hands, and whose primary goal is making a profit off your need. Ultimately, the samurai wife's mastery of the purse strings was far more than just bookkeeping. It was a strategic function vital to the family's stability, reputation, and long-term survival. Her ability to stretch the stipend, save for the future, manage resources efficiently, and navigate the complexities of the marketplace was a quiet but powerful force that underpinned her husband's ability to perform his public duties without the constant worry of domestic insolvency. She was the unsung guardian of the family fortune, the one who ensured that the lights stayed on, or rather, the lanterns were filled with oil, and everyone was fed, clothed, and housed, allowing the master of the house to focus on the important business of being a samurai in the external world. It was a role that demanded constant vigilance, sharp intelligence, and an unwavering commitment to the family's well-being, often performed with quiet efficiency and little external recognition. So, you've mastered the complex dance of the household budget, ensuring the rice stores are full and the cash box isn't empty. You're the financial wizard of the estate, keeping everything afloat. But running a samurai household wasn't just about managing money and people. It was fundamentally about ensuring the continuation and prosperity of the family line, especially the production of the next generation of samurai leaders. And this crucial, weighty responsibility, shaping the minds and characters of the children, fell squarely onto the shoulders of the wife. Imagine the pressure. Your husband is out dealing with the shogun or the daimyo, upholding the family name in the public sphere. His reputation, his future, and the very survival of the lineage depend on the quality of the sons you raise. These aren't just kids you're sending off to kindergarten. These are the future stewards of the family estate, potentially warriors, administrators, or advisors who will inherit the family's status and duties. Their success or failure will echo through generations. No pressure, right? It's like being the head coach of a minor league team. But if your players don't make it to the majors, your entire family gets sent down to the farm league. Permanently. The wife's role in child-rearing began from infancy, but her influence was particularly profound during the formative years, before sons began their more rigorous training in martial arts and classical studies, which was often overseen by male tutors or the father himself. But the foundational education, the instilling of core values, the teaching of etiquette, and the basics of literacy, that was the wife's domain. She was the first teacher, the primary moral compass, and the chief disciplinarian, though punishment might be carried out by a senior servant at her direction. Think about what a young samurai needed to learn. It wasn't just how to swing a sword, though that would come later. They needed to understand the intricate rules of samurai society, the importance of loyalty, filial piety, honor, duty, and proper conduct in every situation. They needed to learn to read and write, often starting with basic kana, syllabaries, and moving on to kanji, Chinese characters, and classical texts. Calligraphy was essential, not just as an art form, but as a reflection of one's character and discipline. They needed to learn history, particularly the history of their own clan and the great warrior tales that embodied samurai ideals. And they needed impeccable manners, how to bow correctly, how to speak to superiors and inferiors, how to behave during formal ceremonies and social gatherings. A mainstream historical fact about samurai education is that reading and writing were considered essential skills for the warrior class, even during the Edo period's long peace. While martial training remained important, the transition to a bureaucratic class meant that literacy, administrative skills, and knowledge of classical literature and history became increasingly valued. Samurai weren't just soldiers. They were expected to be cultured individuals capable of governing and advising. The wife's role in laying this educational foundation was therefore critical. She wasn't just teaching ABCs, she was preparing her sons for a life of service and leadership in a complex, highly literate society. The wife would often personally oversee early lessons, teaching her children reading using primers and classical stories, guiding their hands in calligraphy practice, and recounting tales of famous samurai heroes and virtuous figures to instill moral lessons. She would also supervise the lessons given by tutors if the family could afford them, ensuring that the curriculum aligned with the family's standards and the child's progress was satisfactory. It was a constant process of guidance, encouragement, and correction. Beyond academics, the wife was responsible for cultivating the child's character. This involved teaching them discipline, patience, resilience, and the importance of self-control, qualities crucial for a samurai. She would model proper behavior herself and enforce household rules rigorously. Disobedience or unbecoming conduct reflected not only on the child but on the wife's ability to raise them properly, and by extension, on the entire family's reputation. It was like being a full-time life coach, principal, and drill sergeant, all while maintaining a serene and composed demeanor. You couldn't just put them in front of a screen and hope for the best. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some samurai wives were highly educated themselves, having been trained in classical literature, poetry, and calligraphy. While formal education for women was not as widespread as for men, women from samurai families often received instruction in these areas, sometimes from their own mothers or tutors. These educated wives were better equipped to teach their children, particularly in literacy and classical studies, and could also serve as intellectual companions to their husbands. It wasn't unheard of for a wife to be more knowledgeable in certain classical subjects than her husband, though this was rarely openly acknowledged. Historians still argue whether samurai wives had significant influence over their sons' later career paths or if that was exclusively the father's domain. While fathers certainly made the ultimate decisions regarding their sons' training and placement in service, the values, skills, and character traits instilled by the mother in the early years undeniably shaped the kind of samurai the son would become. A wife who emphasized diligence, loyalty, and intellectual pursuits might subtly steer her son towards an administrative career, while one who focused on martial tales and physical discipline might encourage a more traditional warrior path, within the constraints of the Edo peace. Her influence, though often indirect in later years, was foundational. The wife's role also extended to the education and upbringing of daughters. While daughters were not expected to follow the samurai path in the same way as sons, they were educated in skills necessary for running a household, managing finances, and maintaining social connections, essentially, everything their mothers did. They learned sewing, weaving, cooking, household management, etiquette, and often some level of literacy and classical knowledge, preparing them to become effective samurai wives themselves in the future. The mother was the primary role model and teacher for her daughters, passing down the complex knowledge and skills required to manage a high-status household. It was an apprenticeship that began in childhood and lasted until marriage. The wife's success in raising well-behaved, capable, and morally upright children was a direct reflection on her own competence and the family's virtue. A son who brought shame upon the family through misconduct or incompetence could severely damage the father's reputation and career prospects. Conversely, a son who excelled in his studies, demonstrated impeccable manners, and served his lord diligently was a source of immense pride and a testament to his mother's efforts. It was a high-stakes game of parenting, where the rewards were the continuation of the family line and status, and the penalties could be severe. She managed this intricate process of education and character formation while also juggling all her other duties, overseeing staff, managing finances, handling social obligations, and preparing for emergencies. There were no separate schools for young children. Their education happened within the home, under her watchful eye. She had to ensure that tutors were effective, that children were disciplined appropriately, and that their learning progressed at the right pace. It required constant attention, patience, and a deep understanding of the values the family held dear. It's like homeschooling multiple kids with different learning styles and needs, while simultaneously running a large business and hosting formal dinners for your boss. Ultimately, the samurai wife's role in shaping future samurai leaders was one of her most significant, albeit least publicly acknowledged, contributions. She was the architect of their character, the foundation of their education, and the first person to instill in them the values that defined the samurai class. Her work in the inner chambers ensured that when her sons stepped out into the external world of duty and service, they were equipped not only with the necessary skills but also with the moral compass and discipline required to uphold the family name and contribute to the stability of Edo society. It was a quiet, persistent form of influence that shaped the very fabric of the samurai class from within the walls of their homes. You've successfully guided the next generation of samurai, instilling virtue and teaching them their characters are as polished as their father's sword. But even the most virtuous, well-educated samurai son needs a network to thrive in Edo society. Samurai life wasn't lived in a vacuum. It was a constant interplay of relationships, obligations, and carefully maintained connections. And managing this intricate web of social ties, smoothing potential ruffled feathers, hosting guests with impeccable grace, and ensuring the family presented the right face to the world, that, too, was primarily the wife's domain. Step out of the children's learning room for a moment and into the receiving chambers. Imagine the scent of burning incense, the quiet swish of silk as servants move silently, the perfectly arranged seasonal flowers in the tokonoma alcove. This is where the social battles were won or lost, not with swords, but with politeness, protocol, and the subtle art of hospitality. Your husband might be the one meeting the visiting official or fellow retainer, discussing matters of state or clan politics, but it was your responsibility to ensure the setting was perfect, the refreshments were appropriate for the guest's rank, and the entire interaction reflected positively on your family's status and sophistication. Think of yourself as the family's chief diplomat and event planner. You weren't just throwing casual dinner parties, you were orchestrating carefully choreographed social performances. Guests could range from your husband's superiors or colleagues within the clan hierarchy to relatives, allies from other domains, especially important during the Sankin-Kotai system when lords and their retinues traveled and needed places to stay or visit, or even important figures from other social classes like wealthy merchants or scholars, depending on your husband's connections and needs. Each type of guest required different protocols, different levels of formality, and different types of entertainment or refreshment. It was like hosting a state dinner, a business lunch, and your in-laws all in the same week, and you had to nail every single one. A mainstream historical fact about samurai social life is the immense importance placed on gift-giving and reciprocal visits. Maintaining relationships wasn't just about pleasant conversation, it involved a constant exchange of courtesies, presents, homage and formal calls. The wife was responsible for managing this cycle. She had to keep track of who had given the family gifts, and what they were, when visits were made and received, and ensure that appropriate return gifts were prepared and delivered in a timely manner. Failing to reciprocate properly could be a serious social blunder, implying disrespect or a lack of understanding of social norms, which could damage the family's reputation. It's like having a massive spreadsheet just for tracking who gave you what for Christmas, except if you forget someone, your husband might lose his job. Hosting guests involved meticulous planning. The wife oversaw the preparation of meals, ensuring the cuisine was suitable for the guest's status and dietary needs, if known, and that the presentation was aesthetically pleasing. Food was an art form in Edo, Japan. She directed the servants on how to serve, where guests should be seated. Seating arrangements were highly symbolic and dictated by rank, and how to anticipate their needs without being intrusive. She also had to ensure the guest rooms were prepared, clean, and comfortable, with appropriate bedding and amenities. It was a full-scale operation for every visitor, whether they were staying for an hour or a week. Maintaining relationships extended beyond formal hosting. The wife cultivated connections with the wives of her husband's colleagues and superiors. These relationships could be crucial for exchanging information, seeking advice, or building alliances within the complex social ecosystem of the samurai class. Wives often formed their own networks, sharing news, gossip, and support. These informal connections could sometimes provide valuable insights into political currents or personal dynamics that her husband might not have access to. Imagine the power of a well-placed conversation over tea. It could potentially avert a political misstep or secure a favorable outcome for the family. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that samurai wives sometimes used their social networks to gather intelligence. While not spies in the dramatic sense, information flowed through these female networks. News about political developments, personnel changes, or even personal scandals within other samurai families could be exchanged during social calls or gatherings. This information, when relayed discreetly to her husband, could give him an edge in navigating the treacherous waters of samurai politics. It's like being a social media influencer, but your currency is sensitive information instead of sponsored posts, and the stakes are much, much higher. Historians still argue whether the social influence of samurai wives was truly independent or merely an extension of their husband's status and connections. Did her charm, intelligence, and network-building skills genuinely enhance the family's standing, or was her social success simply a reflection of her husband's position? While her opportunities were certainly dictated by her husband's rank, her ability to capitalize on those opportunities, to build genuine rapport, to manage complex social situations flawlessly, and to leverage her network for the family's benefit demonstrates a level of agency and influence that went beyond simply being her husband's helpmate. She wasn't just attending parties, she was actively working the room for the family business. Managing relationships also involved navigating potential social pitfalls. Samurai society was rife with strict rules of etiquette and hierarchy. A misstep, using the wrong form of address, sitting in the wrong place, offering an inappropriate gift, or failing to show proper deference, could cause offense and damage relationships. The wife had to be intimately familiar with these complex rules and ensure that she, her children, and her staff adhered to them rigidly. She was the household's etiquette expert, the one who made sure everyone knew which fork to use. If they used forks, which they didn't, but you get the idea. It was all about knowing the precise rules of the game and playing them perfectly. This social labor was often invisible to the outside world, just like her other domestic duties. The success of a social gathering was attributed to the host, the husband, but the immense effort and skill required to make it happen, the planning, the preparation, the management of staff, the perfect execution of protocol, was the wife's accomplishment. She was the stage manager, director, and producer of every social interaction that happened within the home, ensuring the performance was flawless, even if she rarely took a bow. Consider the stress involved. You are constantly under scrutiny, not just by your guests, but by their staff, who would report back to their own mistresses. Your household's cleanliness, the quality of your tea, the behavior of your children, the efficiency of your servants, all of it was being judged, and those judgments contributed to the collective opinion of your family. You couldn't have a bad day, couldn't snap at a servant in front of a guest, couldn't let the facade slip. It required an incredible level of self-control and performance, day in and day out. It's like living in a reality show where the judges are incredibly stern feudal lords and ladies, and the prize is your family's continued social existence. Her ability to navigate this social labyrinth with skill and grace was not just a pleasant accomplishment, it was essential for the family's advancement and security. Strong relationships with influential families could provide patronage, support during difficult times, or advantageous marriage alliances for her children. Conversely, social isolation or poor relationships could leave the family vulnerable. The wife's quiet work in building and maintaining these connections was a fundamental investment in the family's future, a crucial part of the overall strategy for survival and prosperity in the competitive world of the Edo samurai. She was the weaver of the social safety net, the architect of alliances, and the guardian of the family's public face, all from the quiet confines of the inner household. You've mastered the delicate dance of social calls and gift exchanges, ensuring the family's face is polished and their connections are strong. You've charmed the visiting officials, impressed the relatives, and subtly gathered intelligence over cups of green tea. The social fabric you weave is strong, a vital layer of protection and opportunity for your family. But even the most impeccable manners and the most powerful allies can't stop a fire from raging through a wooden city, or the ground from shaking violently, or a sudden illness from sweeping through the household. Samurai life in Edo, while generally peaceful, was still precarious. Natural disasters were frequent, illness was a constant threat, and political fortunes could shift on a dime. And when calamity struck, the person everyone looked to for immediate action, the one who had to ensure the survival of everyone under her roof, was once again you, the wife. Imagine the constant hum of anxiety just beneath the surface of that calm, ordered household. While you're overseeing a calligraphy lesson or directing the kitchen staff, a part of your mind is always assessing risks. Is there enough water stored in case of fire? Are the emergency rice reserves secure? Do the servants know the evacuation plan? It wasn't enough to manage the good times, you had to be perpetually prepared for the worst. It's like living in a beautiful, expensive house that's also in a hurricane zone, on a fault line, and built entirely of kindling. And your job is to make sure everyone survives when the inevitable happens, using only what you've squirreled away and your wits. No pressure again, right? The wife was the household's chief risk assessor and disaster preparedness manager. This wasn't a task delegated to a junior retainer. It was a core responsibility that demanded foresight, detailed planning, and ruthless prioritization. Her duties included stockpiling essential supplies, establishing emergency procedures, and training the household staff, and sometimes even family members, on what to do when disaster struck. She had to be the calm center in chaos, the one who knew where everything was, who should do what, and how to keep people alive and the family unit intact. Stockpiling was a significant part of this preparedness. The family's primary wealth and sustenance was rice, and maintaining a substantial emergency reserve was paramount. This rice had to be stored safely, away from dampness and pests, and rotated regularly to prevent spoilage. But preparedness went far beyond rice. You needed reserves of dried foods, like dried fish, vegetables, and seaweed, salt, essential for preservation, cooking oil, fuel, wood or charcoal, clean water stored in large vats or cisterns, basic medicines and herbs, bandages, extra bedding, tools for simple repairs, and even emergency clothing. And of course, some form of portable wealth, perhaps small bags of gold coins or valuable items that could be easily carried if the house had to be evacuated. It's like being a prepper, but your bunker is just a reinforced storeroom, and your survival depends on persuading 20 panicked people to follow instructions. A mainstream historical fact about Edo period Japan is the devastating frequency of fires, particularly in large cities like Edo. Built primarily of wood and paper, packed tightly together, a single spark from a cooking hearth or bath fire could quickly engulf an entire neighborhood, or even large parts of the city. Samurai estates, while often having some open space around them, were not immune. Wives had to oversee the maintenance of firefighting equipment, like buckets and hooks, ensure water sources were accessible, and drill staff on forming bucket brigades. In a major fire, the priority might shift from fighting the fire to saving lives and salvaging what valuables they could. The wife was the one making those life-or-death decisions in the moment. Planning for emergencies also involved establishing clear procedures. Where would family members gather if the house had to be evacuated? What were the fastest and safest escape routes? Who was responsible for getting the children out? Who would attempt to secure the family's important documents or ancestral items? The wife had to think through these scenarios and ensure that key staff members understood their roles. This wasn't written down in a formal manual. It was knowledge passed down, practiced, and reinforced through her authority. It was like being the head of a volunteer fire department, an emergency response team for your own private city block, except everyone lives there too. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that samurai wives sometimes kept detailed, hand-drawn maps of their estates, noting the location of wells, cisterns, emergency exits, and storage areas for vital supplies. These maps were not just for navigation, they were strategic tools for managing the household during a crisis. They might also mark the locations of important, or easily portable valuables. These weren't fancy blueprints. They were practical guides to survival, kept private and known only to the wife and perhaps a few most trusted senior retainers. Imagine hiding a treasure map to your emergency supplies and escape routes right under everyone's nose. Historians still argue whether samurai wives had the unilateral authority to make critical decisions regarding the family's property or safety during an immediate crisis, particularly if the husband was absent. Did she have the right to order valuable items destroyed, like tearing down part of the house to create a firebreak, a common tactic, or order an evacuation against the wishes of a hesitant senior retainer, based solely on her own judgment? While her husband was the ultimate authority, the speed and severity of disasters often demanded immediate action. It's likely that in practice, a capable wife was expected to take charge and make necessary decisions, with her judgment implicitly trusted, especially if she had proven herself in the past. Managing illness was another crucial aspect of safeguarding the household's well-being. Wives often had a basic knowledge of traditional medicine, herbal remedies, and nursing care. They oversaw the care of sick family members and staff, administering treatments, ensuring hygiene, and deciding when to call for outside medical help, which could be expensive and not always effective. An epidemic sweeping through the household could incapacitate staff and threaten the lives of family members, so the wife's ability to manage health crises was vital. We'll talk more about health later, but in a crisis context, It was about containment and survival. The wife's responsibilities also extended to preparing for the less dramatic, but equally disruptive, calamities like the husband's prolonged absence, during Sankirtan or official duties, or financial hardship. During Sankirtan, the wife often remained at the family's main estate in their home domain, managing affairs and resources while her husband resided in Edo. This meant she was effectively running the family's entire operation, often for months or a year at a time, making decisions about finances, staff, and property in his stead. This was a planned absence, but it still required immense capability and the ability to govern independently. If the family faced political disgrace or financial ruin, the wife's preparedness and resilience were tested to the extreme. Having emergency funds or portable valuables could mean the difference between destitution and maintaining a semblance of dignity. Her ability to manage resources during lean times, stretch the remaining stipend, and potentially even oversee the sale of assets was crucial for navigating these personal crises. It's like being the CEO who has to execute the bankruptcy plan while also keeping your family fed and housed. The mental burden of this constant state of readiness must have been immense. While the external facade was one of calm composure, the wife carried the weight of knowing that at any moment, fire, flood, earthquake, or illness could shatter the fragile peace. Her quiet preparations, her hidden stores of supplies, her mental checklists of procedures, these were the invisible foundations of the household's security. She didn't wear armor or carry a sword, but her foresight and management skills were her shield and her strategy for protecting her family from the unpredictable dangers of the world outside, and sometimes inside, their walls. It was a form of silent, constant warfare against potential disaster, fought with ledgers, stored rice, and unwavering determination. You've secured the emergency rice, mapped the escape routes, and drilled the staff on bucket brigades. You're ready for fire, flood, or famine, at least as ready as anyone could be in a world without insurance adjusters or FEMA. But while preparing for calamity is essential, the most constant, undeniable demand on your management skills is the one that happens 3 times a day, every single day, without fail, feeding everyone who lives under your roof. From the master of the house to the lowest stable hand, everyone needs to eat. And managing the logistics of feeding a large, potentially variable household, your family, your husband's retainers, dozens of servants, and frequent guests, was a monumental undertaking that fell squarely into your incredibly capable hands. Think about your own kitchen today. Maybe you're cooking for 2, 4, maybe a family of 6. Now imagine planning, sourcing, and preparing meals for 20, 50, or even over 100 people, day in and day out. This wasn't just a matter of throwing some ingredients together. It was a complex operation involving inventory management, procurement, quality control, scheduling, and catering to a range of needs and statuses. Your pantry wasn't just a cupboard, it was a vital storeroom, and your kitchen staff was a small army requiring constant direction. It's like running a high-end restaurant that's open 24/7, feeds everyone from royalty to busboys, and you also live upstairs and are responsible for everyone's health and happiness. Easy peasy, right? The cornerstone of the Edo period diet, for samurai and commoners alike, was rice. We talked about the koku system and how rice was used as currency, and while some of that rice was sold for cash, a large portion was consumed right there on the estate. You were responsible for overseeing the storage of vast quantities of rice, protecting it from rats, insects, and dampness that could ruin a year's supply in weeks. You had to manage milling, turning the brown rice into white rice, which was preferred by the samurai class, and then allocate the correct amount for each meal, for each section of the household. Rice wasn't just a side dish. It was the main event, the caloric foundation of everyone's diet. But humans, even samurai, can't live on rice alone, no matter how perfectly steamed it is. A balanced diet required vegetables, fish, especially for those living near the coast or rivers, occasional meat, though less common than fish or vegetables, and various seasonings and preserved foods. Sourcing these ingredients was another logistical puzzle. Some vegetables might be grown on the estate, overseen by the gardening staff reporting to you. Fish and other perishables had to be purchased fresh from markets, often early in the morning. Non-perishables like salt, dried seaweed, miso paste, soy sauce, and cooking oil needed to be bought in bulk and stored properly. You had to know market prices, seasonal availability, and have reliable suppliers or staff members who could navigate the bustling, sometimes chaotic, marketplaces. It was like being the head chef and the head buyer for a massive, multi-site catering company, all before breakfast. Meal preparation itself was handled by the kitchen staff, *Koreakata*, who worked under the supervision of a head cook, who in turn reported to you, or perhaps a senior lady-in-waiting who relayed your instructions. While you likely weren't personally chopping vegetables or stirring pots, unless you were a lower-ranking samurai wife with minimal staff, you were the one planning the menus, deciding what would be served to whom, ensuring quality and hygiene, and managing the kitchen's resources. You had to coordinate their work, making sure meals were ready on time for the different sittings. The master might eat separately, followed by the family, then senior retainers, and finally the general staff. A mainstream historical fact about samurai dining is that meals, particularly for the master and guests, were often served individually on small trays or in lacquer bowls, rather than as shared dishes in the modern Western style. This required precise portioning and presentation for each person. The wife oversaw this, ensuring that the food served reflected the status of the diner. The master and important guests would receive the finest cuts of fish, a wider variety of dishes, and more elaborate presentation, while lower-ranking staff received simpler fare. It was a visual representation of the household hierarchy, served on a tray. Planning meals wasn't just about nutrition, it was also about seasonality and tradition. Edo period cuisine placed a strong emphasis on using fresh, seasonal ingredients. You had to plan menus that changed with the time of year, utilizing what was available from your own garden or the local markets. There were also specific dishes and rituals associated with various festivals and important dates throughout the year, and you were responsible for ensuring these were observed correctly, adding another layer of complexity to the meal planning. It's like trying to run a restaurant where the menu changes completely every month, and you also have to cater all the major holidays for a picky, demanding clientele. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that samurai wives sometimes experimented with different cooking methods or incorporated regional dishes from their own hometowns or places they had lived. While traditional Edo cuisine had its standards, there was room for individual flair and innovation, especially in less formal family meals. A wife might introduce a specific pickling technique learned from her mother, or a way of preparing fish unique to her home domain. These small touches could add variety to the household diet and connect the family to different parts of Japan, a subtle form of cultural exchange happening within the domestic sphere. Historians still argue whether the samurai diet was consistently nutritious and varied for everyone in the household, or if the lower ranks often subsisted on a much plainer diet primarily of rice and simple pickles. While the master and his family undoubtedly enjoyed a more diverse and higher quality diet, the sheer scale of feeding dozens of people meant that providing a truly balanced and varied diet for everyone was a significant challenge, dependent on the family's wealth and the wife's management skills. Did the stable hand get enough protein? That might have been a question the wife pondered, or perhaps it was simply beyond the logistical capabilities and social expectations of the time. Managing food waste was also crucial. In a world where resources were precious, throwing away food was unthinkable. You had to oversee the careful use of every ingredient, utilizing leftovers creatively, preserving food through drying, pickling, or salting, and ensuring that even scraps were used, perhaps for animal feed or fertilizer. This required vigilant oversight of the kitchen staff and a deep understanding of traditional preservation methods. It was like having a zero-waste kitchen policy enforced with the stern gaze of a samurai wife. The sheer volume of supplies needed was staggering. Imagine the rice sacks, the barrels of miso and soy sauce, the stacks of dried fish, the baskets of vegetables arriving daily or weekly. You had to have adequate storage space, clean, dry, and secure, and systems for tracking inventory to know when supplies were running low. Running out of a staple ingredient was not an option. It would cause significant disruption and reflect poorly on your management. You were the master logistics coordinator, ensuring the supply chain from farm and market to kitchen and table never broke down. Beyond the daily meals, you were also responsible for providing food and drink for guests during social calls or longer visits, as we discussed earlier. This required extra planning, often involving special ingredients and more elaborate dishes. You had to coordinate with the kitchen staff to ensure these special meals were prepared flawlessly, on top of the regular household meals. It was like catering a formal event while also running a busy cafeteria. Ultimately, the samurai wife's role in feeding the family and retainers was far more than just supervising cooks. It was a fundamental act of provisioning, sustenance, and maintaining the physical well-being of everyone under her care. Her ability to manage the complex flow of food, from procurement and storage to preparation and distribution, was essential for the smooth functioning of the household and the health and strength of its inhabitants. It was a constant, demanding task that required meticulous planning, sharp oversight, and a deep understanding of resources and people. She was the provider, the sustainer, the quiet force ensuring that no one went hungry in the world she governed within the walls of the samurai estate. You've navigated the complex logistics of feeding the household, ensuring everyone from the master to the stable boy has had their fill of rice and whatever else your budget and planning could provide. The kitchen is quiet now, fires banked, the scent of yesterday's stew lingering faintly. But as the sun begins its descent, another constant, demanding need looms, clothing everyone. Outfitting a samurai household wasn't just about keeping people covered. It was a visual declaration of status, an intricate system of textiles, tailoring, repair, and storage that required constant oversight. And like so many other vital functions within the estate, this fell squarely into your hands, the wife's. Imagine looking at your household roster, family members, senior retainers, dozens of servants of various ranks, potentially even occasional guests staying for extended periods. Each person needed multiple sets of clothing appropriate for different seasons, occasions, formal, informal, work, and their specific position within the hierarchy. You weren't just buying clothes off the rack, you were managing a mini textile industry. It's like being the head buyer, production manager, and wardrobe supervisor for a repertory theater company that also happens to be a feudal estate, and everyone expects their costumes to be historically accurate and perfectly maintained. No pressure, right? The type and quality of fabric a person wore were strictly dictated by their social status. Your husband, as a samurai, would wear silk, especially for formal occasions. The quality and pattern of the silk would further indicate his rank. Other family members would also wear silk, perhaps of a slightly less fine weave. Senior retainers might wear silk or high-quality cotton, while lower-ranking servants would wear cotton or rougher hemp fabrics. Colors, patterns, and even the style of garment were often regulated by sumptuary laws, aimed at maintaining the visual order of society and preventing people from dressing above their station. You had to be intimately familiar with these rules to ensure everyone was dressed appropriately. A servant accidentally wearing a pattern reserved for samurai could cause serious trouble. Procuring the textiles was a major undertaking. While some wealthy households might produce their own silk or cotton, most relied on purchasing fabric from merchants in nearby towns or cities. You, or a trusted servant acting on your behalf, would need to source bolts of various fabrics, negotiating prices and ensuring quality. This wasn't a quick trip to the fabric store. It involved building relationships with suppliers, understanding market fluctuations, and assessing the quality of goods by touch and sight. Imagine buying enough fabric in bulk to clothe 50 or more people for a year, judging quality by hand, and haggling over every bolt, all while making sure you weren't getting ripped off. It's enough to make you miss online shopping, even with its questionable return policies. Once the fabric arrived, it had to be turned into garments. Wealthier households might employ full-time seamstresses or tailors among their staff. In more modest homes, the wife herself, or senior female servants, might do the sewing. Kimonos and other traditional garments required specific skills to cut and stitch, and the process was labor-intensive. You oversaw this entire process, from cutting the fabric, a decision requiring careful planning to minimize waste, to stitching the final seams. You had to ensure garments fit properly, were well made, and adhered to the required styles for each person's rank and the garment's purpose. A mainstream historical fact is that clothing in Edo Japan was often designed to be taken apart and reassembled. Kimonos, for instance, were constructed from long, straight panels of fabric that were only lightly stitched together. This allowed garments to be easily unpicked for cleaning, dyeing, to refresh color or change it, or repurposing the fabric. Old kimonos could be turned into smaller garments for children, linings for new clothes, or even cleaning cloths. This practice was driven by both practicality and a deep-seated aversion to waste. Repair and maintenance were constant tasks. Clothing wore out, seams split, fabric tore. You oversaw the mending and patching of garments, ensuring that clothes were kept in good repair for as long as possible. This wasn't just about frugality. A samurai family was expected to maintain an appearance of neatness and order, even in their everyday wear. Shabby or ill-maintained clothing on family members or staff would reflect poorly on the household's management and the family's status. It's like having a full-time alterations and dry cleaning business running in your home, and your clientele are incredibly particular about every stitch. Storage was another challenge. Clothing had to be stored carefully to protect it from insects, especially moths, dampness, and dust. Garments were often folded and stored in wooden chests, *tansu*, or hung in special closets. Seasonal clothing needed to be rotated and stored away when not in use. Delicate silk required particular care. You were responsible for ensuring that storage areas were kept clean and dry, that clothing was properly folded and stored, and that measures were taken to deter pests, perhaps using dried herbs or camphor. Imagine finding storage space for hundreds of garments for dozens of people, across multiple seasons, in a pre-industrial home, and keeping them all pristine. Good luck finding that many cedar chests. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that samurai wives sometimes used elaborate padding and layering techniques to adjust the apparent size and shape of garments, particularly for formal wear. This wasn't just about fashion, it could be used to convey a sense of gravitas or presence. It was a subtle art of tailoring the body through the clothes, known only to those who managed the wardrobe intimately. It's like being a costume designer who also specializes in subtle body armor made of cotton batting. Historians still argue whether the wife had complete autonomy over the family's clothing budget and style choices, within the constraints of sumptuary laws, or if the husband retained final approval, particularly for his own formal attire. While the wife undoubtedly managed the day-to-day procurement and maintenance, decisions about purchasing expensive silks or commissioning new formal wear might have required consultation with the master, especially given the significant cost involved. However, her expertise in textiles, tailoring, and household finance would likely have made her recommendations highly influential. Beyond the practicalities, clothing was a form of communication. The colors, patterns, and quality of fabric conveyed information about the wearer's status, the occasion, and even the family's taste and prosperity. Ensuring everyone was dressed appropriately was a crucial part of maintaining the family's public image and navigating social interactions. A carefully chosen kimono for a formal visit could subtly convey respect or reinforce alliances. A well-maintained, simple cotton garment for a servant conveyed order and proper management. Every stitch, every fold, was part of the larger performance of being a samurai household. The sheer volume of work involved in managing the clothing for a large household is hard to overstate. It required constant attention, from the initial purchase of fabric to the final repair of a worn hem. You had to track inventory, manage staff, seamstresses, laundresses, oversee repairs, ensure proper storage, and stay informed about regulations and seasonal needs, all while balancing this against the household budget. It was a never-ending cycle of making, mending, and managing, performed largely behind the scenes, but absolutely essential for presenting the family to the world in a manner befitting their status. Your quiet work with needle and thread, with bolts of fabric and storage chests, was as crucial to the family's standing as your husband's polished sword or his knowledge of classical texts. You've clothed everyone from head to toe, ensuring the silk is pristine and the cotton is mended, presenting a facade of impeccable order to the outside world. Your storage chests are organized, the seamstresses are busy, and you can finally breathe for a moment, until someone starts coughing. Or worse, develops a fever. Because alongside the constant demands of finance, staff, children, social calls, and disaster preparedness, there was another ever-present concern that required your vigilant attention: the health and well-being of every single person living under your roof. Managing illness, administering medicine, and overseeing basic healthcare wasn't something you outsourced. It was a fundamental part of your job description as the samurai wife. Imagine the household as a small, contained ecosystem, and you are the resident physician, nurse, and public health official, all rolled into one. With dozens of people living in close proximity, family members, elderly relatives, infants, children, young and old servants, illness could spread rapidly. There were no hospitals in the modern sense readily available for everyone, especially not within the confines of the estate. Medical practitioners existed, but calling one was expensive and often a last resort. So, the first line of defense, the one responsible for monitoring health, recognizing symptoms, and providing initial care, was you. It's like being the school nurse for an entire boarding school full of people who also work for you, and if you get it wrong, the headmaster's career is on the line. No pressure still. Your role began with observation and prevention. You had to be attuned to the health of everyone in the household, noticing if a servant seemed unusually tired, if a child had a persistent cough, or if an elderly relative seemed weaker than usual. This required constant vigilance and interaction with your staff, particularly those who worked closely with family members or in the servants' quarters. You couldn't just wait for someone to report feeling sick. You had to proactively monitor the health of your miniature community. Basic medical knowledge was considered an essential skill for a samurai wife. This wasn't formal medical training, but rather a practical understanding of common ailments, their symptoms, and traditional remedies. You would have learned about various medicinal herbs, how to prepare poultices, teas, and decoctions, and how to treat minor injuries like cuts and bruises. Your store of medicines likely included dried herbs, roots, plasters, and perhaps some more complex traditional Chinese or Japanese medicines purchased from apothecaries. It was like having a well-stocked natural pharmacy tucked away in your storage rooms, and you were the only one who knew how to use everything. When someone fell ill, you were the one who oversaw their care. This involved isolating the sick person if the illness was contagious, ensuring they were comfortable, had proper nourishment, often simple, easily digestible foods like rice gruel, and administering the appropriate remedies. You would direct servants on how to care for the patient, ensuring they followed your instructions precisely. Nursing care was labor-intensive, especially for serious illnesses, and required patience and dedication. You were the one making the calls about whether a fever was serious enough to warrant calling a doctor, or if it could be managed with rest and herbal teas. A mainstream historical fact about Edo period medicine is the prevalence of traditional herbal medicine, *Kampo*, often based on principles derived from Chinese medicine. While Western medicine began to make inroads later in the period, particularly through the Dutch at Nagasaki, Kampo was the dominant form of treatment for most people. Samurai wives would rely heavily on this knowledge, using common herbs like ginger, licorice root, and various medicinal mushrooms to treat a wide range of ailments from colds and fevers to digestive issues. Knowing which herbs to use for which symptoms and how to prepare them correctly was a vital skill. Managing illness also involved maintaining hygiene, as much as possible in a pre-modern context. While concepts of germ theory were unknown, people understood that cleanliness could help prevent the spread of disease. You would oversee the cleaning of living quarters, particularly around sick individuals, ensure that water sources were kept clean, and manage waste disposal. Basic hygiene practices like washing hands, though not with modern soap, were understood to some extent. It was like being the head of infection control for a large, bustling household, armed with intuition and tradition instead of hand sanitizer and disinfectants. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some samurai wives were skilled in practices like acupuncture or moxibustion, burning dried mugwort on or near the skin, which were also parts of traditional medicine. While these might have been practiced by specialized practitioners, A wife might have learned basic techniques to alleviate common complaints like headaches or muscle aches within the family, particularly if her own mother or a trusted family retainer had such knowledge. Imagine your mom offering to treat your headache with tiny needles. Probably not the first thing you'd think of today. Historians still argue whether the medical care provided within samurai households by wives was generally effective or if it was largely based on superstition and tradition rather than empirical evidence. While some traditional remedies undoubtedly had therapeutic value, others might have been ineffective or even harmful. The effectiveness of the wife's medical management likely depended heavily on her individual knowledge, experience, and access to reliable information or practitioners. Was she truly healing the sick, or simply providing comfort and basic care while hoping for the best? It's a question that's hard to answer definitively from historical records. Beyond treating physical ailments, the wife also played a role in overseeing the overall well-being of the household, which included mental and emotional health. While these concepts weren't understood in modern terms, a good wife would be aware of stress or unhappiness among family members or staff and try to address the root causes. Providing a stable, orderly, and supportive environment was itself a form of preventative healthcare. She might offer quiet counsel, mediate disputes, or ensure that individuals had adequate rest and time for personal pursuits, within the constraints of their duties. The health of the household staff was particularly important, as their labor was essential for the estate's functioning. A sick servant meant lost productivity, and a widespread illness could cripple the household. You had to balance the need to care for sick staff with the practical demands of running the household, deciding when someone was too ill to work and when they could return to their duties. This required a delicate balance of compassion and practicality. It's like managing sick leave for your entire company, but you're also the one making the chicken soup. Childbirth was another significant health event that the wife oversaw, even if skilled midwives were called in. She would manage the preparations for the birth, ensure the mother received proper care during and after delivery, and oversee the health of the newborn. Infant and child mortality rates were high in this period, making the wife's role in safeguarding the health of the youngest generation particularly crucial for the continuation of the family line. Ultimately, the samurai wife's role as guardian of health and well-being was a constant, demanding, and deeply personal responsibility. She was the first responder to illness and injury, the keeper of traditional medical knowledge, and the manager of care for every soul under her roof. Her quiet work in monitoring health, administering remedies, and maintaining hygiene was essential for the survival and strength of the family and its household. It was a role that demanded knowledge, compassion, resilience, and the ability to remain calm and decisive in the face of sickness and suffering, performed without the aid of modern medicine, diagnostic tools, or even a simple thermometer. You've navigated the treacherous waters of household health, tending to fevers and mending scraped knees, ensuring everyone under your care has the best chance of surviving the ailments of the age. The scent of herbal poultices might still linger faintly in the air, a reminder of your quiet vigilance. But running a samurai household wasn't just about the material world, the rice stores, the clean kimonos, the healthy bodies. It also involved the unseen world, the spiritual and the ritual, ensuring the family's harmony with the divine and the reverence for their ancestors. And overseeing this vital, often deeply personal, aspect of household life was yet another duty that rested squarely on your shoulders. Step into a different corner of the estate now, perhaps a quiet room or a dedicated alcove. Here, the air might be stiller, carrying the faint scent of incense or polished wood. This is where the household shrines resided, typically a Buddhist altar, but Sudan dedicated to the family's ancestors, and a Shinto shrine, Kamadana for the native Japanese deities. These weren't just pieces of furniture, they were the spiritual heart of the home, connecting the living family to their lineage and the protective forces of the universe. And your responsibility was to be the primary caretaker and officiant for these sacred spaces. Think of yourself as the family's spiritual steward. While your husband might participate in larger religious ceremonies or official Shinto rites connected to his lord or the state, the daily rituals within the home were your domain. You ensured the altars were kept meticulously clean, free of dust and clutter. You changed the offerings regularly: fresh water, rice, tea, seasonal fruits, or other foods appropriate for the deities or ancestors being honored. You lit the incense, lit the candles or lamps, and offered prayers for the family's health, prosperity, and protection. It was a constant, quiet practice, woven into the fabric of your daily routine, often performed early in the morning before the day's busy tasks began. It's like being the groundskeeper and minister for your own private chapel and cemetery, combined, and forgetting a single daily duty could bring bad luck. No pressure again. The Buddhist altar was particularly important as the focal point for ancestor veneration. Samurai families, like many Japanese, believed in the importance of honoring their deceased relatives, providing for their spiritual needs, and seeking their guidance and protection. The Basudan housed memorial tablets, ***, inscribed with the names of ancestors, and sometimes portraits or other mementos. Your duties here involved daily offerings, chanting sutras, if you had the knowledge and inclination, and performing rituals on significant dates, such as memorial anniversaries, or the Obon festival when ancestors were believed to return to the family home. You were the living link to the family's past, ensuring their memory was honored and their spirits were at peace. The Shinto shrine, the Kamidana, housed talismans or small statues representing various Shinto kami, deities, often associated with protection, prosperity, or specific aspects of nature. Daily offerings here were similar: water, rice, salt. Prayers were offered for the family's safety, good fortune, and the success of their endeavors, particularly your husband's duties. While Shinto rituals could be complex and involve priests for major events, the daily home practice was simpler, focused on showing respect and seeking blessings from the divine forces that watched over the household. It was like maintaining a miniature spiritual power grid for the house, making sure the connection to the cosmic Wi-Fi was always strong. A mainstream historical fact about Edo period Japan is the widespread practice of both Buddhism and Shinto concurrently, often referred to as Shinbutsu Shugo, syncretism of kami and Buddhas. Most samurai families adhered to both traditions, maintaining separate altars within their homes and observing rituals associated with each. This wasn't seen as contradictory. The two belief systems served different, complementary purposes. Buddhism often focused on death, ancestor veneration, and salvation, while Shinto was more concerned with life, purity, and seeking blessings from nature deities and protective spirits. Beyond the daily rituals, you were also responsible for overseeing the observance of larger family and religious ceremonies that took place within the home or required household coordination. This could include welcoming Buddhist priests for memorial services, preparing the household for major festivals like Obon or New Year, or coordinating visits to family temples or local shrines. These events often involve specific foods, decorations, and protocols, all of which fell under your purview. It required meticulous planning and direction of staff, ensuring that sacred spaces were properly prepared, offerings were abundant, and rituals were performed with the appropriate solemnity and respect. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some samurai wives, particularly those from families with strong ties to specific temples or shrines, might have possessed scrolls or texts detailing specific family rituals or prayers passed down through generations. These weren't just generic religious practices. They were sometimes unique to the family lineage, containing prayers for specific ancestors or invoking particular protective deities associated with the clan. Learning and preserving these unique rituals was a way of maintaining the family's identity and connection to its history, a sacred form of knowledge passed from mother-in-law to wife. It's like having a secret family recipe, but instead of a delicious stew, it's a prayer that supposedly keeps the bad spirits away. Historians still argue whether samurai wives had genuine spiritual authority within the household or if their role was primarily that of ritual implementer, merely performing duties dictated by tradition or their husbands. Did they interpret omens, seek divine guidance for family decisions, or have a personal spiritual practice that went beyond prescribed duties? Or were they simply the meticulous custodians of the family's religious obligations, ensuring the rituals were performed correctly but without personal spiritual power? The answer likely varied greatly depending on the individual wife's beliefs, personality, and relationship with her husband and in-laws. Your role in upholding these spiritual and ritual duties wasn't just about tradition. It was deeply intertwined with the family's well-being and reputation. A household that neglected its ancestral rites or failed to honor the deities was seen as disrespectful and potentially inviting misfortune. Ensuring these duties were performed diligently was seen as contributing to the family's harmony, prosperity, and protection from harm. It was a quiet form of spiritual insurance, managed through daily devotion and meticulous attention to ritual detail. Managing these duties also involved instructing junior family members and servants, particularly female staff, on the proper procedures for cleaning the altars, making offerings, and behaving respectfully in these sacred spaces. You were passing down the knowledge and practices that would ensure the continuation of these rituals for the next generation, just as you passed down skills in household management and child-rearing. It was a form of spiritual apprenticeship, ensuring the flame of family tradition continued to burn brightly. Consider the mental space these duties occupied. Amidst the chaos of budgeting, staff management, and crisis preparedness, you had to carve out moments of quiet contemplation and reverence. The daily rituals at the shrines were not just tasks. They were opportunities for reflection, for connecting with something larger than the immediate demands of the household. They provided a sense of continuity, purpose, and perhaps even solace in a demanding life. It's like having a mandatory meditation break built into your workday, except you're praying for your entire extended family and everyone who works for you. Ultimately, the samurai wife's role in upholding spiritual and ritual duties was a vital, though often unseen, component of her overall household management. She was the guardian of the family's spiritual life, the keeper of ancestral memory, and the one who ensured the household remained in harmony with the divine forces believed to influence their fate. Her quiet devotion and meticulous observance of rituals contributed to the family's sense of identity, provided a source of comfort and stability, and were seen as essential for their continued prosperity and protection. It was a responsibility that required reverence, discipline, and a deep understanding of the traditions that bound the family to its past and its future. You've lit the incense, offered the rice, and ensured the ancestors are properly honored, keeping the spiritual heart of the home beating strong. You've navigated the seen and unseen worlds within your estate, from the bustling kitchen to the quiet shrine. But your world doesn't end at the outer gate or the ancestral altar. It extends outwards into the complex, often fraught, landscape of family relationships. And managing the delicate balance of ties with your husband's family, particularly his parents, siblings, and the wider clan network, was another essential, often challenging, part of your quiet influence. Imagine joining your husband's family. You're not just marrying him, you're marrying into his entire lineage, his history, his obligations, and his existing power structure. While you are mistress of your own household, you are still, to some extent, subordinate to his parents, especially his mother, if they are alive and living nearby or even within your own home. This wasn't like meeting your in-laws for Thanksgiving dinner. This was potentially living under the same roof, or at least under their constant scrutiny, while trying to establish your own authority and run your household according to your own and your husband's needs. It's like getting a promotion to CEO, but your old boss and her boss still live in the building and have opinions on everything from the coffee machine to the quarterly reports. No pressure still. The relationship with your mother-in-law, *Obasan*, or Obasama, was often the most critical and potentially the most challenging. In many samurai families, especially those with a long lineage, the mother-in-law retained significant influence over household affairs, even after her son married and took over as head of the family. She might live in a separate wing of the house, or even share living quarters, and her word could carry immense weight, sometimes overriding the wife's decisions. Navigating this relationship required immense patience, deference, and diplomatic skill. You had to show respect for her experience and position while subtly asserting your own authority and implementing your vision for the household. It was a constant tightrope walk between honoring tradition and managing modern realities, Edo period modern realities. Think about the potential for friction. You have your own way of doing things, perhaps learned from your own mother or developed through your own experience. Your mother-in-law has her established methods, passed down through her own lineage. She might disapprove of your budgeting choices, your approach to disciplining the children, your management of staff, or even the way you fold the laundry. Every decision you make could be subject to her silent, or not so silent, judgment. Your goal was to gain her trust and respect, proving yourself a capable manager worthy of running the household, ideally turning her into an ally rather than a constant source of opposition. It's like trying to get your startup funded, but the primary investor is your husband's formidable mother, and her return on investment is the smooth running of your household and the proper upbringing of her grandchildren. Beyond the immediate family, you were also responsible for maintaining ties with your husband's siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, and the wider network of the clan. This involved exchanging formal visits, sending appropriate gifts on special occasions, births, deaths, marriages, festivals, and attending family gatherings. These connections were vital for the family's social standing and could provide a network of support or potential alliances within the larger samurai hierarchy. You were the keeper of the family's social calendar and the manager of their extended family relationships. It was like being the social secretary for a very large, very important, and sometimes very gossipy extended family. A mainstream historical fact about samurai family structure is the strong emphasis on the continuity of the household, *i.e*, rather than individual happiness. Marriage for samurai was often less about romantic love and more about strategic alliances, producing heirs, and integrating into the husband's lineage. The wife's primary duty was to serve her husband's family and ensure the prosperity of his line. This structural reality underscored the importance of her relationship with her in-laws. It was not just a personal matter but a fundamental aspect of her role within the IE. Managing relationships with female relatives, such as sisters-in-law or aunts, could also be complex. These relationships could be sources of support and friendship, or they could involve rivalry and subtle competition, particularly concerning status within the family or the upbringing of children. Navigating these dynamics required tact, diplomacy, and the ability to maintain a harmonious facade even if underlying tensions existed. You had to be both a supportive family member and a careful negotiator in the complex web of female relationships within the clan. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that while the relationship with the mother-in-law was often portrayed as difficult, there are historical examples of samurai wives who developed close, respectful, and even affectionate relationships with their mothers-in-law. In some cases, the mother-in-law became a trusted advisor and confidant to the wife, sharing her knowledge of household management and family traditions. These relationships were built on mutual respect and recognition of each other's contributions to the family's well-being, showing that the dynamic wasn't always one of inherent conflict. It wasn't just about survival. Sometimes, it was about building genuine bonds. Historians still argue whether the influence of the mother-in-law consistently undermined the authority of the wife, or if it served more as a system of mentorship and continuity, passing down essential household knowledge and ensuring adherence to family traditions. Did the wife constantly battle for control, or did she often learn from and collaborate with her mother-in-law, particularly in the early years of her marriage? The reality likely varied greatly depending on the personalities involved, the specific family's customs, and the mother-in-law's willingness to cede authority. Your ability to manage these complex family relationships directly impacted your standing within the household and the clan. A wife who successfully navigated her relationship with her mother-in-law, maintained good ties with her husband's relatives, and fostered harmony within the extended family network brought honor to her husband and strengthened his position. Conversely, a wife who caused friction, alienated relatives, or failed to uphold family obligations could damage her husband's reputation and create internal strife that affected the entire household. Your social skills and emotional intelligence were as crucial here as your financial acumen or management of staff. Consider the emotional labor involved. You had to constantly monitor your words and actions, anticipate potential misunderstandings, and manage your own feelings in the face of criticism or unsolicited advice. You couldn't afford to be overly emotional or openly resentful. Composure and respectful deference were key. It was like being a full-time therapist and conflict mediator for your extended family, but you also live with some of your most challenging clients. This responsibility also extended to teaching your children, particularly your daughters, how to navigate these family relationships. They had to learn how to show proper respect to their grandparents, aunts, and uncles, and how to behave appropriately during family visits and gatherings. You were modeling the behavior they would need to replicate when they eventually married into other families, ensuring the continuation of these social skills and the maintenance of family ties across generations. Your quiet work in managing these relationships often went unnoticed or was simply expected. A harmonious family was not a testament to your exceptional skills. It was merely the baseline expectation. But the absence of harmony, the presence of open conflict or strained relationships, would certainly be noted and attributed, at least in part, to your failure as a wife and household manager. It was a high-stakes game of family politics, played out behind the scenes, with the stability and reputation of your household hanging in the balance. In essence, balancing in-laws and family ties was about integrating yourself and your immediate family unit into the larger, existing structure of your husband's lineage. It required navigating established power dynamics, showing deference to seniority and tradition, and actively cultivating connections that benefited the family as a whole. It demanded patience, diplomacy, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to maintaining harmony, even when faced with challenging personalities or conflicting expectations. It was a quiet, constant effort that underpinned the family's social standing and contributed significantly to their overall stability in the intricate world of the Edo samurai. You've navigated the intricate dance with the mother-in-law, charmed the distant cousins, and maintained a fragile peace within the extended clan network. You've smoothed ruffled feathers, exchanged countless polite gifts, and ensured that family gatherings pass without major incident. This tireless effort in managing the complexities of family ties and household harmony isn't just about keeping things pleasant within the walls. It has a profound, often hidden, impact that stretches far beyond your gate. Because ultimately your management, your character, and your social grace directly shape something invaluable for your husband, his reputation, and by extension, his career. Think about it from the perspective of the Edo period samurai world. Public life was all about appearance, honor, duty, and competence. Your husband's lord, his colleagues, his rivals, they were constantly assessing his capabilities. While his performance in his official duties was paramount, his domestic life wasn't entirely separate. A samurai's home was seen as a microcosm of his ability to govern. If he couldn't maintain order, solvency, and harmony within his own household, how could he possibly be trusted to manage a domain, advise a lord, or handle important administrative tasks? Your quiet work was, in essence, providing the essential, stable foundation upon which his public persona was built. It's like trying to be a brilliant architect, but the construction company you hired to build your own house is constantly late, over budget, and the walls are crooked. People are going to wonder if you really know what you're doing, aren't they? Your management of the household finances, for instance, wasn't just about keeping the family fed, it was a direct reflection of your husband's prudence and foresight. A household known to be well managed, living within its means, and free from crippling debt suggested a master who was responsible and capable of handling resources, skills highly valued in a bureaucratic class. Conversely, rumors of financial mismanagement, lavish spending beyond the stipend, or constant borrowing would quickly spread and damage your husband's standing. It would imply he lacked control, either over his own desires or over his household, either of which was acceptable for a samurai. Your meticulous ledgers and careful budgeting were, in a way, contributing to his credit rating in the eyes of his peers and superiors. Similarly, the order and discipline within your household staff reflected directly on your husband's ability to command. A household with lazy, disobedient, or squabbling servants suggested a lack of effective leadership at the top. A well-run household, where staff were diligent, respectful, and efficient, was seen as a sign of a master who could inspire loyalty and maintain order, qualities essential for managing subordinates in his official capacity. You were, in effect, demonstrating his leadership skills through the efficiency of your domestic workforce. It's like your boss being judged on how tidy your desk is. Unfair? Maybe, but that was the reality. Your character and virtue were also under scrutiny, not just for your own sake, but as a reflection of your husband and the family's moral standing. Samurai society placed immense value on qualities like modesty, loyalty, diligence, and moral uprightness, for both men and women. A wife known for her virtue, her composure, her dedication to her family and household duties, enhanced her husband's reputation. She was seen as a worthy partner, a pillar of the family's moral strength. Conversely, any perceived flaw in your character, gossip, extravagance, laziness, or improper behavior, could bring shame upon the family and damage your husband's standing. It wasn't just personal. It was a public relations issue for the entire lineage. A mainstream historical fact is that a samurai's reputation was one of his most valuable assets, closely tied to his honor and status. Damage to reputation could lead to loss of position, reduction in stipend, or even more severe consequences. Because the household was considered an extension of the master, the wife's management and conduct were inherently linked to this crucial aspect of his public life. A wife who ran a disorderly or disreputable household could, through no direct action of his own, significantly harm her husband's career prospects. Your social skills were another critical factor in this hidden influence. The way you hosted guests, managed social obligations, and cultivated relationships with the wives of your husband's colleagues and superiors could significantly benefit his career. A wife who was charming, diplomatic, and adept at navigating social hierarchies could help build alliances, gather useful information, remember those social intelligence networks, and ensure that your family was well regarded within the samurai community. Think of the subtle advantages gained when the wife of your husband's superior finds you delightful and mentions to her husband what a capable and well-connected woman you are. It's like your spouse's work party being mandatory, but the real work is you making sure everyone's boss thinks you're both just wonderful. Conversely, social missteps, awkward interactions, or failure to observe proper etiquette during visits could cause offense and damage relationships that were important to your husband's career. Being seen as socially inept or disrespectful could make your family less desirable as allies or colleagues. Your ability to perform the intricate dance of social protocol was, therefore, a form of diplomatic service to your husband's career. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some samurai wives were specifically chosen for marriage not just for their lineage or dowry, but also for their perceived intelligence, education, and management skills. Families seeking a bride for their son who was destined for a high-ranking or administrative position might prioritize these qualities in a prospective wife, recognizing that her capabilities would be essential for supporting his career and managing the complex household that came with his status. It wasn't always just about political alliances. Sometimes, it was about hiring the right CEO for the family business. Historians still argue whether the influence of the wife on her husband's reputation was a consciously acknowledged factor in samurai society, or if it was simply an unspoken expectation, a background condition for his success. Did samurai men explicitly recognize and value their wives' contributions to their public standing, or was it simply taken for granted that a good wife would manage the household impeccably, and any failure to do so was seen as her personal fault rather than a reflection on his leadership? The extent to which this influence was acknowledged and appreciated likely varied greatly between individual couples and families. Your role in shaping the children, particularly the sons, also had a long-term impact on your husband's legacy and reputation. A son who grew up to be a capable, virtuous, and successful samurai was the ultimate testament to the family's strength and the quality of his upbringing. While the father might oversee later training, the moral foundation and early education provided by the mother were seen as crucial. Your success as a mother directly reflected on your husband's ability to produce worthy heirs, a key measure of a samurai's success. It's like your kid's report card being hung on your husband's office wall, and if they fail, he gets demoted. The pressure to maintain this impeccable facade, this quiet efficiency, was immense. Every aspect of your life, from the cleanliness of your home to the behavior of your children and staff, was potentially being judged, and those judgments were being factored into the assessment of your husband. You couldn't afford to have an off day, couldn't let your personal struggles show, couldn't make mistakes that would reflect poorly on the man you were dedicated to supporting. It required constant vigilance, self-control, and a deep understanding of the unwritten rules of reputation management in samurai society. Your influence, though rarely publicly celebrated or formally acknowledged, was the invisible scaffolding that supported your husband's position in the world. While he navigated the external pressures of duty and politics, you ensured that the domestic base was secure, orderly, and presented a face of competence and virtue to the world. Your quiet, tireless work in managing the household, cultivating relationships, and upholding the family standards was not just a service to your immediate family. It was a fundamental contribution to your husband's ability to succeed as a samurai and maintain the family's standing in the rigid hierarchy of Edo Japan. It was a form of power wielded from within the inner chambers, subtle yet profound, shaping destinies one perfectly managed detail at a time. You've woven the intricate tapestry of your husband's reputation, ensuring that the quiet competence within your walls reflects favorably on his public face. You've managed finances, staff, children, social calls, and even the family's spiritual connection, all with a quiet grace that belies the immense effort involved. This is the rhythm of life in a samurai household during times of peace, a demanding, complex, but ultimately predictable cycle of duties and responsibilities. The days flow into weeks, the weeks into seasons, marked by the turning of the rice harvest, the changing of seasonal clothing, the observance of festivals, and the steady progress of the children's education. It's a constant, low-level hum of activity, requiring sustained diligence and meticulous planning. You know the schedules of the staff, the inventory in the storehouses, the social calendar months in advance, the needs of each family member. Your influence is felt in every perfectly swept tatami mat, every well-prepared meal, every respectful bow from a servant. It's a life of quiet power, exercised through tireless management and unwavering commitment. It's like being the conductor of a massive, long-running symphony, where every instrument needs constant tuning and every note must be played perfectly, day after day. And you conduct it all with a serene smile. But this rhythm, this carefully constructed order, was always subject to sudden, jarring disruption. The Edo period was an era of relative peace compared to the preceding centuries of warfare, but it wasn't a world without crisis. Natural disasters were a constant threat. Earthquakes could level buildings in moments, fires could sweep through estates with terrifying speed, floods could ruin crops and damage property. Illness, too, could strike without warning, felling family members or incapacitating essential staff, sometimes in epidemic proportions. And the husband's duties often required him to be away from home for extended periods, leaving the wife solely in charge of the entire operation during his absence. When these moments of calamity struck, the wife's role didn't just change, it intensified dramatically, demanding immediate decision-making, extraordinary resilience, and the ability to lead in crisis. Think back to our earlier discussion about disaster preparedness. During peacetime, this was about maintaining stock levels, checking equipment, and perhaps occasional drills, though perhaps less formal than modern ones. But when the ground started to shake, or smoke appeared on the horizon, your planning immediately shifted into action. You weren't just overseeing inventory anymore, you were directing people, prioritizing lives over possessions, making split-second decisions about escape routes, rallying terrified servants, and potentially even helping to fight a fire or rescue trapped individuals. Your quiet authority had to become overt leadership, your composure a source of strength for others. It's like being the captain of a ship during smooth sailing versus navigating a hurricane. The job title is the same, but the required actions are entirely different, and the stakes are infinitely higher. Illness in normal times meant overseeing care, administering basic remedies, and perhaps calling a doctor if needed. But a serious epidemic sweeping through the household? That was a full-blown crisis. You had to implement isolation measures, manage limited medical supplies, coordinate nursing care for potentially dozens of sick individuals, including yourself, perhaps, if you fell ill, and make difficult decisions about who received limited resources or attention. The constant observation of health we discussed became hypervigilance, the basic medical knowledge a desperate toolkit for survival. You were battling an unseen enemy within your walls, relying on intuition, traditional knowledge, and sheer force of will to keep death at bay. It was like being a wartime field nurse, except the battlefield is your own home and the patients are everyone you care about. Perhaps the most common, and yet still demanding, disruption to the household rhythm was the husband's absence. A mainstream historical fact is that the Senkin-Kotai system required daimyo, feudal lords, to spend alternating years in Edo, the capital. While lower-ranking samurai weren't subject to this exact system, their duties could still take them away from their home domains for extended periods, sometimes for months or even years. During these absences, the wife was effectively the acting head of the household. She wasn't just managing daily affairs. She was making all significant decisions within the domestic sphere, often including financial ones that might otherwise require her husband's approval. She was the one who dealt with unexpected issues, mediated serious disputes among staff, oversaw major repairs, and represented the family's domestic interests in the local community. This period of the husband's absence wasn't just about maintaining the status quo. It was about actively governing the household independently. You had to exercise judgment, resolve conflicts, and ensure that the family's resources and reputation were preserved, or even enhanced, while your husband was away. Your quiet influence had to become more direct leadership, your behind-the-scenes management brought to the forefront. It's like the CEO going on a year-long sabbatical and leaving the COO, who usually just handles internal logistics, in complete charge of everything, including shareholder relations and strategic planning. Suddenly, your job description just expanded exponentially. A quirky or fringe tidbit related to these absences is that samurai wives sometimes managed the family's affairs so capably during their husbands' senkin-kotai that they were seen as more competent administrators of the home domain's resources than some of the male officials left in charge. There are anecdotes of wives making shrewd financial decisions, managing land holdings effectively, and maintaining order in the domain's affairs that were overseen by the household, demonstrating a level of capability that went beyond mere domesticity. Historians still argue whether the authority wielded by samurai wives during their husband's absence was formally recognized as equivalent to his, or if it was always understood to be temporary and delegated, subject to his eventual return and review. Did she have the right to make major decisions, or was she simply expected to handle things and hope her husband approved later? The reality likely varied, but the practical necessity of running a large estate meant that capable wives were often given, or took, significant decision-making power out of necessity. Beyond planned absences, unexpected crises like a sudden financial downturn due to political changes, or the need to support the husband if he fell into disfavor, also disrupted the rhythm. In these times, the wife's financial management skills were pushed to the limit. She might have to drastically cut expenses, oversee the sale of non-essential assets, or manage the family's affairs while they lived in reduced circumstances. Her resilience and ability to adapt were crucial for navigating these periods of hardship and maintaining the family's dignity and survival. The contrast between the rhythm of peace and the demands of emergency highlights the multifaceted nature of the samurai wife's role. In stable times, she was the meticulous manager, the quiet administrator, the social diplomat, the spiritual guide. In times of crisis, she transformed into the emergency responder, the crisis manager, the acting head of household, the resilient survivor. Her skills were constantly being tested, her capabilities stretched and adapted to meet whatever challenge arose. Her ability to transition between these modes, to maintain composure and effectiveness whether overseeing a tea ceremony or organizing a bucket brigade, speaks volumes about the immense pressure and responsibility she carried. The smooth functioning of the household during peace was her achievement, but its survival during calamity was her testament to her true strength and capability. She didn't just keep the house running, she kept it from falling apart, sometimes quite literally, in the face of forces far beyond her control. It was a life lived on a knife's edge between carefully managed order and potential chaos, and her quiet competence was the only thing keeping the balance. You've weathered the storm, literally and figuratively. You've directed the bucket brigades during the fire, nursed the household through the fever, and single-handedly governed the estate, while your husband was away in Edo. You've shown yourself capable of not just maintaining order, but of leading in chaos, adapting to hardship, and ensuring the fundamental survival of everyone under your care. The rhythm of peace and the demands of emergency are two sides of the same coin of your responsibility, and you've proven yourself adept at both. But is that all there was? Was the life of a samurai wife solely defined by the relentless demands of management, duty, and crisis? Or were there moments, quiet pockets of time carved out amidst the endless tasks, where you could pursue something beyond mere necessity? Imagine, after a long day of overseeing the kitchen, checking on the children, and perhaps dealing with a minor dispute among the servants, the household finally begins to settle. The lanterns are lit, casting soft pools of light on the tatami. Your husband is perhaps in his study, or entertaining a guest. The children are asleep or with their attendants. For a brief period, the immediate, urgent demands might subside. In these precious moments, samurai wives, particularly those from higher-ranking families with sufficient staff to handle the most menial tasks, might turn their attention to personal skills and quiet pursuits. These weren't just idle pastimes. They were often cultivated arts that reflected refinement, provided intellectual stimulation, and sometimes even contributed to their capabilities as household managers and social figures. It's like finally finishing your monster to-do list and getting an hour to yourself, except your hobby involves centuries-old traditions and requires intense discipline instead of binge-watching something questionable on Netflix. One of the most highly valued personal accomplishments for a samurai wife was literacy and skill in calligraphy. We touched on this when discussing educating children, but for the wife herself, it was more than just a practical skill. Being able to read classical literature, poetry, and historical texts was a source of personal enrichment and intellectual engagement. Practicing calligraphy was a meditative discipline, a way to cultivate patience, focus, and aesthetic sensibility. A beautiful hand was admired and seen as a reflection of a refined character. Imagine the quiet concentration as you grind the ink, dip your brush, and carefully form each character, the only sound the soft scrape of the brush on paper. It was a world away from the clamor of the kitchen or the tension of managing the budget. Poetry, particularly the composition of waka, a form of classical Japanese poetry, was another common pursuit among educated women. This wasn't just a hobby, it was a respected art form, a way to express emotions, observe nature, and engage in intellectual exchange. Wives might compose poems for personal reflection, to commemorate special occasions, or even to exchange with friends or family members. Some became quite skilled, their verses circulated among their social circles, a quiet testament to their sensitivity and education. It's like being part of a secret online poetry club, but instead of posting on social media, you're carefully writing verses on delicate paper to be shared among a select few. Musical instruments like the koto, a long zither, or the shamisen, a three-stringed lute, were also popular among samurai women. Learning and playing these instruments required dedication and skill, providing both personal enjoyment and a way to entertain guests or family members. The soft, resonant notes of the koto, or the lively sound of the shamisen could transform the atmosphere of the home, adding a layer of cultural sophistication. It was a way to bring beauty and harmony into the domestic sphere, a stark contrast to the harsh realities of managing staff or preparing for disaster. A mainstream historical fact is that tea ceremony, shinoya*, and flower arranging, ikebana*, were considered essential accomplishments for samurai wives. These weren't just hobbies. They were highly formalized arts deeply intertwined with aesthetics, philosophy, and social etiquette. Mastering the intricate movements of the tea ceremony, understanding the symbolism of the utensils, and being able to create a harmonious atmosphere for guests was a crucial social skill. Similarly, ikebana involved arranging flowers and other natural elements in a way that conveyed meaning and beauty, often displayed in the tokonoma of the receiving room. These arts demanded precision, patience, and a deep appreciation for nature and aesthetics, skills that undoubtedly contributed to the wife's ability to create a refined and welcoming environment for guests, thereby enhancing the family's social standing. Beyond these celebrated arts, wives might also pursue skills like sewing and textile arts, even if they had seamstresses. Understanding the craft was valuable. Cooking, perfecting recipes beyond the daily fare, or gardening, cultivating specific plants for their beauty or medicinal properties. These activities, while related to household duties, could also be pursued with a level of skill and artistry that elevated them beyond mere chores. Imagine taking pride in growing a particularly beautiful iris or mastering a complex pickling technique passed down through generations. These were small victories, quiet expressions of competence and creativity. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some samurai wives were reported to have trained in martial arts, particularly forms like naginata, a pole weapon, or even swordsmanship, although this was less common during the peaceful Edo period than in earlier warring states eras. While not a universal expectation, a wife with some martial training could potentially defend herself or the household in extreme emergencies, adding another layer to the idea of her being prepared for any calamity. It's like your quiet, reserved neighbor secretly being a black belt in karate. You just never know. Historians still argue whether these personal pursuits were genuinely chosen for self-fulfillment, or if they were primarily seen as expected accomplishments for women of a certain status, another form of duty designed to make them more attractive marriage prospects or better social assets for their husbands. Were they pursuing their passions, or fulfilling societal expectations? The truth likely lies somewhere in between, varying greatly from individual to individual. For some, these arts were undoubtedly a source of genuine joy and intellectual stimulation, a way to maintain their sense of self in a life dominated by service to others. For others, they might have felt more like obligations, skills to be acquired and displayed as part of their role. Regardless of the motivation, these pursuits provided a dimension to the samurai wife's life beyond the purely administrative and managerial. They allowed for personal expression, cultivated refinement, and connected them to the broader cultural currents of the time. They were a quiet rebellion against the purely functional aspects of their role, a way to nurture the inner life amidst the demands of the external world of the household. These skills also contributed to the cultural atmosphere of the home, making it a place of beauty, learning, and refinement, not just a functional unit for survival and social climbing. A home where poetry was recited, music was played, and beautiful tea ceremonies were held was a richer environment for the children's upbringing and a more pleasant place for the husband and guests. Your quiet cultivation of these arts added immeasurably to the quality of life within the walls you governed. It was a form of influence that wasn't about commanding staff or managing budgets, but about shaping the very spirit and ambience of the household. So, while the vast majority of a samurai wife's time and energy were consumed by the immense responsibilities of household management, finance, child-rearing, social duties, and crisis preparedness, there were these moments, these quiet pursuits, that allowed them to be more than just tireless administrators. They were individuals with intellect, creativity, and a desire for personal refinement. Their skill with a brush, a koto, or in arranging flowers wasn't just a charming accomplishment, it was a testament to their capacity for beauty, discipline, and self-cultivation, adding another layer to the complex, often hidden, picture of their influential lives. You've seen the layers peel back, revealing the intricate world within the samurai estate, a world where your quiet hand guided everything from the family finances to the complex dance of social calls, the spiritual rituals, and even the readiness for fire or flood. You've seen that beyond the endless duties, there were moments carved out for personal cultivation, for poetry, music, and the quiet discipline of calligraphy or tea ceremony. These pursuits weren't just distractions. They were part of the tapestry of a life lived with immense responsibility, a life whose impact, though often unseen and rarely sung about in the grand historical narratives, was profoundly significant. Step back now from the polished tatami and the scent of incense. Look at the Edo period as a whole. It was a time of peace, yes, but also a time of rigid social structure, economic complexity, and intricate political maneuvering. The samurai class, transitioning from warriors to bureaucrats, held a position of immense power and responsibility. And at the heart of their ability to maintain that position, to serve their lords, to uphold their status, and to perpetuate their lineage, was the stability and efficiency of their households. And that, as you've seen, rested squarely on the shoulders of the wives. Think about it. The samurai husband was expected to dedicate himself fully to his public duties, whether serving in Edo or managing affairs in his home domain. He couldn't be constantly worried about whether there was enough rice, if the servants were stealing, if the children were being properly educated, or if the family was causing social offense. His ability to focus on the external world, the world of politics, administration, and potentially even martial readiness, though less frequent in Edo, was directly enabled by the fact that his domestic world was being managed with impeccable competence by his wife. Her quiet work was the essential background noise, the steady engine that allowed the public machine to function smoothly. Without her, the samurai class would have been far less effective, far less stable. It's like trying to run a major corporation when the entire IT department is on a permanent, unscheduled break, and the power keeps flickering. Things are going to fall apart pretty quickly, aren't they? Her management of finances, as we explored, wasn't just about balancing a household budget. It was about contributing to the family's economic stability. In a system where income was often fixed and expenses variable, a wife's ability to manage resources shrewdly, save for the future, and avoid debt was crucial. This financial prudence within individual samurai households collectively contributed to the economic order, or disorder, if mismanagement was widespread, of the domain and even the shogunate. Her ledgers weren't just household accounts. They were micro-level records of the economic health of the samurai class. Her role in shaping the next generation was perhaps her most enduring legacy. By instilling values, providing early education, and overseeing the moral upbringing of her children, especially her sons, she was directly influencing the future character and capability of the samurai class. The ideals of loyalty, duty, honor, and discipline were first taught and modeled within the home by the mother. When these sons grew up to become effective administrators, loyal retainers, or cultured advisors, their success was, in part, a testament to their mother's foundational work. It's like being the kindergarten teacher for all the future leaders of the country. Your influence is profound, even if you don't get invited to the state dinners later on. The social network you so carefully cultivated, the relationships you maintained with other samurai wives and families, wasn't just about pleasantries. These connections formed a vital, informal layer of communication and alliance within the samurai class. Information flowed through these networks, support was quietly offered during difficult times, and advantageous marriages were arranged, all contributing to the social cohesion and political stability of the samurai world. Your tea parties and gift exchanges were, in a subtle way, acts of diplomacy that benefited your husband's position and the family's security. Imagine trying to navigate the complex social waters of any high-stakes environment without your spouse being able to talk to anyone. You'd be isolated pretty fast, wouldn't you? And when crisis struck, fire, illness, or the husband's absence, your ability to lead, to make quick decisions, and to ensure survival wasn't just saving your own family. It was demonstrating the resilience and capability inherent in the samurai household, a core strength that underpinned the stability of the entire system. The fact that these households could weather significant storms, often under the sole command of the wife, speaks volumes about the trust placed in her abilities and her own inherent strength. A mainstream historical fact that highlights this legacy is that the meticulous household records kept by samurai wives, detailing finances, food consumption, clothing inventories, and even daily events, have become invaluable primary sources for modern historians studying the economic, social, and daily life of the Edo period samurai class. These weren't intended as historical documents, but as practical tools for household management, yet they provide a level of detail about daily life that is often missing from official records, inadvertently preserving a rich picture of their world. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some samurai wives, through their deep knowledge of traditional arts like tea ceremony or flower arranging, became recognized experts in their own right, hosting renowned gatherings or teaching these skills to others, quietly influencing the cultural landscape of their communities beyond their immediate family. Their domestic skills sometimes blossomed into forms of cultural leadership, albeit within specific, often female-dominated spheres. Historians still argue whether the influence of samurai wives represented a form of genuine power or was simply a highly demanding service role performed within the constraints of a patriarchal society. Did their undeniable impact on family stability, reputation, and the upbringing of future generations translate into a recognized form of authority beyond the domestic sphere? Or was their influence largely confined to the home, essential but ultimately subordinate? It's a complex question, reflecting the nuanced realities of power dynamics in historical contexts. Their legacy, then, is not one of grand public achievements or battlefield victories, which were the domain of their husbands. It is a legacy of quiet competence, unwavering dedication, immense resilience, and profound influence wielded from within the walls of the home. They were the unsung architects of samurai family stability, the guardians of lineage and reputation, the tireless managers who kept the entire system running smoothly. While their names may not appear in the official histories of battles or political maneuvering, their impact is woven into the very fabric of Edo period society, in the stable households, the well-raised children, the carefully maintained social networks, and the resilience shown in the face of calamity. Their work was essential, demanding, and constant. It required intelligence, skill, patience, and an iron will, all hidden beneath a veneer of grace and composure. They were the foundation upon which the public world of the samurai rested, the quiet strength that ensured the continuity and prosperity of their families and, in doing so, contributed significantly to the long peace and stability of the Edo period. Their story is a testament to the power of influence wielded from within, a reminder that history is shaped not just by the figures on the public stage, but by the countless, often invisible, hands that build and maintain the world behind the scenes. And as we leave the hushed world of the samurai estate, letting the scent of polished wood and faint incense fade, you can feel the weight of their responsibilities lift, the quiet hum of their tireless work receding into the past. It was a life of immense duty, of silent strength, of influence rarely acknowledged but deeply felt. You can let go now, the day is done, the household is settled for the night. There's nothing left to manage, nothing left to plan, nothing left to guard against. Just the quiet of the evening settling in. It's time to let your own world settle too, to let the thoughts of ancient households and tireless wives drift away like smoke from a banked fire. Rest now.